Kunnen we de vergadering beginnen?
Do you think we might kick off? Says the chair of DSM's AGM. So, ladies and gentlemen, I declare this meeting now open, and I'd like to welcome you all here, shareholders and stakeholders. I hope it's going to be a good meeting. Now, because you can see this live on the website on DSM, I'd like to welcome those who are following the meeting via the website. Also welcome to Mr. Versten and his colleagues from KPMG, our external auditor. In line with the Corporate Governance Code, the external auditor is present in order to be able to answer your questions, possible questions regarding item 4, adoption of the financial statement 2016. The auditor will also give a short presentation in a little while. Behind me, you will see the members of the Supervisory Board, Mrs. van der Meermoor, Miss Kennedy, Miss Haynes, and Messrs. Pan, Julian de Swaan. In the front row, you will see the members of the Managing Board, Miss Matchett and Messrs. Siebersma and de Vreese. Next to me, Miss van den Broek, who's Secretary. She will be making the minutes of this meeting. Now, we all have all seen the agenda and the explanatory notes and all the other documents that were placed on 21 March 2017 on DSM's website. The registration date was Wednesday, 5 April 2017, in compliance with the legally determined date, namely exactly 28 days before this meeting. I note that the invitation to this meeting was made in accordance with the legal and statutory provisions, and that the meeting is thus competent to take lawful decisions. In order to let things go as best as possible, may I ask you that we will take your questions in clustered fashion, and we're going to put a number of agenda points together and then have questions afterwards. Finally, I'd like to welcome our Notary Public, Mrs. Leemreizer. There was the opportunity to give her proxies and voting instructions as an individual third party. She will ensure that this meeting is conducted according to the legal and statutory regulations. Now, a few items of housekeeping as always. The main language here in this meeting is Dutch. You're going to have a simultaneous interpretation of English and Dutch. And you can put questions, should you wish, in English as well. Miss Matchett will answer in English. I would also like to suggest that, as we normally do it, when we go through the items on the agenda, that each speaker in the first round can only ask 3 questions. Now, I know that this is difficult. Sometimes you want to put more questions, but we should try to do that in order to ensure that things run in a supple fashion. Then you, in a second and subsequent rounds, you can ask 3 questions again. We're going to have an electronic voting system today. The Secretary will explain how that works. Now, I'd like to put to you that you should turn off your mobile phones, if you will. Please work out where the emergency exits are. They're the green signs. And if you have to leave in a hurry, please follow the instructions to our staff. During this meeting, you can get coffee, tea, and fresh drinks outside. Please don't bring any of these inside. After the introduction by Mr. Siebersma, I will tell you the amount of the percentage of issued share capital with voting entitlements which is present and lawfully represented. Now, as we've told you, we're going to cluster agenda items together. That means that we're going to, first of all, listen to items 2 and 3 of the agenda and then give you the opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to now put item number 2 on the agenda. That's the annual report for 2016 by the Managing Board. Mr. Siebersma, who is the CEO, is going to tell you what happened in last year. You can see that on pages 14 to 61 of the integrated annual report. The implementation of the remuneration policy of the Managing Board and reserve and dividend policy you can see under agenda points 3 and 5 respectively. But first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Siebersma on the fact that he's been 10 years CEO of this wonderful company. the Royal DSM. And I'd like to thank everybody in the room who's given Mr. Siebesma all this support to get these excellent and sterling results over a decade. Well done. Now, you know that Mr. Siebesma has already offered us all a delicious Limburg fruit pie, and later on we'll have an aperitif. Let's not forget that over the last 10 years, the share price has gone up and up. We started at 35 euros, and now 10 years later, almost 100%, in other words, doubling of the share price over 10 years, and on top of that, a 3% dividend. So well done, Mr. Siebesma, who's changed the portfolio of this company enormously over the 10 years that he's been in charge. But also, you have seen that he has put this company on the map, the corporate governance map. So, I think it's very good that we also are on the World Food Programme as well of the United Nations, and we're also with the World Bank for Climate Change. Well done, Mr. Siebesma. Says Mr. Siebesma. Yes, well, we could just stop there, I think. I better not say anything, says Mr. Siebesma. So, welcome everybody to the AGM of Royal DSM. It's great to see you here today. Some of you, it's pretty much a home match, and some of you got to travel a long way, many a mile to get here. So we're going to look a bit of what we've done over the last years. You will see the sheets are in English, but I'm going to speak Dutch, so everybody is going to get something. What you win on the roundabouts, you lose on the swings. And what I will try to do is I'm going to try to shoot through this quite swiftly in order not to stymie everybody with the length of my presentation. So this is the safe harbour statement. Investor relations on the front row will be pleased to see that. Now, what I'd like to do is give a short introduction to DSM, what kind of company you've got shares in. I wouldn't want you to forget that. And then the strategy over the next years. What are we going to be doing from 2015 to 2018? How we did in 2016, the annual results, and how we are trying to future-proof DSM's results. And then I have a quick leap to the AGM of next year. We've already started 2017 after all. We've done the first quarter of 2017, so I'm going to say a little bit about that. Not too much. So DSM. You've got shares in DSM, and today DSM isn't the DSM of yesteryear. It might be that you've got shares and had shares forever. Then you will remember that it was a state-owned company once upon a time. And then we were a coal mining company, and we were a petrochemical company after the Second World War. And over the last 20 years, we have changed to become a company focused on life sciences and material sciences. Well, what does that mean? It means that if you look at our portfolio, of course, we've changed a great deal. You can see what we've done over the years. Now we're in nutrition for people, for animals, and for high-quality performance materials. We weren't before over the last year, so we've really had to change. We had a number of businesses in that particular sector which we've taken over. Now, what have we done over the last years? All our bulk chemical activities have been sold since 2010. The last one was the caprolactam business in 2015. We've got a solid nutrition business which we've built up. Our materials has been expanded into specialties, and we've got 3 new emerging business areas in our innovation Centre, who, under the leadership of the man sitting in the first row on the right-hand side. So, it's all got to do with science and technology. We did 3 major acquisitions. These 3 that you can see. DSM in 1902. Christ Brocades, much older. Those of you will know that I came from there. And finally, Roche Vitamins, Fine Chemicals from 1930. So these were 3 vital components of our business, which we acquired together with a whole raft of other acquisitions. DSM, of course, was the parent company, 115 years old, you can see, set up in 1902. I always thought, actually, that it was from 1870, so I'm happy to see that I was wrong with that. So what are we in now? We're into food, we're into feed, nutritional ingredients. We're the biggest player in the world in that. We make ingredients for personal care, high quality, high performance materials, and green energy. This, of course, leads us to have a product palette which is extremely broad. Look at what we've got. You can see it on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, what does DSM look like in terms of sales? Well, I'm talking about 2016 figures. Well, on the one side, nutrition, animal nutrition, human nutrition, food specialties are part of Brocades, and personal care. That's the nutrition side. You can read the figures there. And materials on the other side. Materials made of 3 important sectors: engineering, plastics, resins and functional materials, and Dyneema, which, as you know, is a super strong material. And in the middle, we have our new EBAs, our emerging business areas: biomedical, bio-based and solar in red. There is something over and above this, 1.5 billion's worth. These are deconsolidated business units. In other words, they don't count anymore in revenues and profit and loss as we report it. But we have 3 very prominent participations, which is something that we should also have a look at. What are they? Well, these are the significant value in legacy joint ventures and associates. You've got Sinochem Pharmaceuticals on the left. In the middle, you have Patheon Pharma, partly listed on the stock exchange in America. And the third, Chemical Invest. So you can see 50%, 34% and 35% of these individual ventures is what we own. So we have a financial interest in these companies. But we don't have a strategic interest in these companies. You can see the turnover and the profits from these companies. Throughout this presentation, you will see EBITDA and ADJ before it. ADJ means, of course, adjusted. It's somewhat slightly corrected EBITDA. That was EBITDA before exceptional costs. And EBITDA really is the result of our company's trading. I'm wondering, says Mr. Siebers, whether he's pressing the right button on the slide changer, but he obviously is. So there we go. Innovation. Of course, that's an important part of our company. We're a science-based company. What does that mean? It means that technology plays a vital part of what we do. We've got 2 new laboratories we've just opened. One in a new material centre that was last year, and a new one in Delft as well. Mr. van Leen has worked very hard with all our innovation people to keep us in the top quartile of the innovation benchmark. especially when you compare, that is, our practices with other companies. That means 22% of our turnover comes from innovation, compared to 2% back in 2006. So it's going to be rather difficult, of course, to keep this percentage. So we're running hard all the time to stay at the same place. But as you can see, 10 years ago, as I've already mentioned, innovation sales were only 2% of our over sales. Now, I've got two short movies that I'd like to show you. The first one will give you a better idea of what we're actually doing in terms of innovation.
In East Asia, intolerance to the lactose sugar in milk affects 90% of the population. All over the world, athletes push themselves further to get the most from their abilities. In the United States, around 4 billion pounds of unwanted carpet ends up in landfill every year. In a fast-moving global food market, animal welfare and environmental sustainability is more important than ever. Car designers are under extreme pressure to design greener, smarter, and safer cars.
Wer hätte das gedacht? Kunststoffe mit hoher Leistung unter solch extremen Bedingungen. Und dann noch 50% leichter als Metall. Und das bedeutet geringere CO2-emissionen.
Om ons lichaam te beschermen tijdens het fietsen gebruiken we de sterkste vezels ter wereld. Het combineren van stoffen met Dyneema zorgt voor een ontzettend sterke, maar ultra-lichte bescherming. Ze verbeteren onze prestatie.
Wow. Instead of burying unwanted carpet, they're bringing it back to life. Who ever heard of a carpet that can be 100% recycled again and again? Niaga technology. Awesome.
Jeg er glad for, at de klarer sig så godt. De her nye dyrefoderprodukter har virkelig sat skub i mine tøser.
因为高质量的益生菌让我感觉非常好，而且他非常喜欢新的无乳糖酸奶，不仅美味，而且有利于健康。
We're tackling the challenges facing the world today, like working on edible plant proteins that could nourish future generations and ensure brighter lives for all. The future looks bright.
Allemaal innovaties van deze.
So all these are innovations of DSM, your company, that we're extremely proud of. Now, we are really a truly global company now. You can see where our workforce are located around the world, and you can see net sales by destination on the right in the pie chart. Currently, 56% of our employees work outside of Europe. 10 years ago, it was 37 years ago. 10 years ago, it was only 37%. So we were a real European company. Now we're a global company. 65% of our sales are outside of Europe compared to 48 10 years ago. And says Mr. Sievesman, I'm really having a hard time with the clicker. Maybe it's just a counterfeit one. He moves forward. Right, well, we've got a much more diverse workforce, many nationalities, and that has made us very happy, because when you look on our engagement score, it's a really good one, 71%, which is quite a lot higher than it used to be. How many female executives have we got? more than 15%. It was only 1% in 2000, 7% in 2006, and now more than 15%. So, gender diversity, yes, but I think the score could be a lot better than this, says the CEO. Health and safety. Well, I think we've made giant steps forward in 2016 because safety is something which keeps us consistently mindful. We must keep accident frequency down. We've seen that we've improved inordinately in this particular sector. 0.89 in 2006, 10 years later, 0.3 something. Look as well at DSM's ecological footprint. We've had enormous reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions. By 2025, 45% reduction in GHG and 50% of our electricity will come from renewable energy. Now, this is a lovely graph which doubtless makes you very happy. Share price is something which interests us all. As Mr. Raut said, it was 35 euros in 2007 since we started this new program, and 10 years later we were 66.47 yesterday. And that was an increase of 90%, our all-time high, whereas the AEX just went up. It didn't go up at all, in fact. AEX, the Amsterdam General Share Index, dropped, in fact, over that period of time. Our dividend has increased by 75% from 2006 to now. And here you can see, this was in the Telegraph of today, indeed, where DSM has never been worth as much as it is today. And they're dead right. They're absolutely right. Makes me smile. I think over a long period, investment in this company has really been an outperformer. It's beaten the Dutch stock exchange from 6 to 12 billion in terms of share capital. It's generated an enormous amount of value for us all. The next slide. And let's keep on moving. Now, what is our strategy? Well, the good thing about our strategy over the years to come, do we have a strategy as a world? Maybe that you're aware that there is a UN strategy of SDGs. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. This was signed off by all members of the United Nations. These 17 objectives. I think the UN could have possibly communicated this strategy a little bit better, because essentially it's a strategy of these SDGs that are just discussed in corporate boardrooms. But the major trends in the world are clearly being focused on in terms of investment to resolve these problems. And DSM strategy is well aligned with all of these. What we do with nutrition, our involvement in climate and energy, and our particular attention to circular and bio-based economy, because we are making products which tick the boxes for all of these three sectors. Now, here is a rather simplified slide which shows our strategy since 2015. We've developed a lot. On the left, you can see the general trends in the world, the influence on our strategy. Underneath, you can see our science basis, life sciences and material sciences. How can we grow with these four arrows which indicate the growth drivers? Well, first of all, we are improving our financial results. We are growing. We are looking at cost and productivity, and we're trying to get a better return on capital. Our 2018 targets is EBITDA growth, and what is our return on ROCE return. With EBITDA, we've asked, well, what we expect is in 2018 to hit the target for high single digit, and return on investment and capital employed, we hope to have high double-digit basis points. That high double-digit basis points actually just means approximately 1%. So that's what we've said in the last year. And why do we think we can hit these targets? Well, we've done a lot to adjust our business portfolio. We've bought businesses, we've sold businesses, and we think it's possible to get an even better return from what we're doing. So over the next years, we're not going to be doing a lot in terms of M&A, but we are going to be more busy trying to get a better return on capital employed and to better integrate the acquisitions that we've made over the past years. I'll revisit this in 2016 and 2017 and show you that our strategy is working well. What are we doing in terms of nutrition? Well, we're trying to expand the core. We've got a vitamin B6 plant we've just built in China, expanding Heerlen gum and pectin, and expanding our premix network for our clients. Of course, we're also trying to add new products, eubiotics for antibiotic-free poultry, for example. Stevia is a natural low-calorie sweetener with no artificial products in it. It's a natural product. And Green Ocean, we're looking at a way to have salmon fish farms in a sustainable way so we don't fish our oceans empty. So we have to, that small fish eat algae, big fish eat the smaller fish. Fair enough. That's the name of the game. But still we can do something here. Clean cow, what's that about? Cows have methane emissions, front and backside, indeed. And you can reduce methane emissions from cows. That's Clean Cow. Is what we're working on, because actually methane emissions from cows have a considerable impact, comparable with that of traffic. Now, over and above this, we've got new products in new segments and regions. Fish oil products and consumer products, the ASO products. Maybe you know that. They are working quite well. If you look at materials, we have been busy to upgrade our portfolio, to take it to the up right-hand side of the sheet, pull it away from the bottom left-hand side. Some specialties we have to bid farewell to, and others we are devoting a considerable focus to over the last year and in years to come. Let me tell you what we're trying to do to accelerate growth in specialties. Engineering plastics, for example. Thanks to DSM, we're making ultra-thin USB connectors. So look at your iPhone, how small it is and how much can fit into it. Then, resins and functional materials, waterborne coatings, Niaga. You just saw that in the film. Niaga is something which you can, if you invert Niaga, it says again, it's for carpet recycling. You can literally recycle them again and again and again. And Dyneema, as we know, high performance fabric solutions. We have ambitious cost reduction and efficiency improvement programs, which we started back in 2015, where we were going to Save money in DSM-wide support functions and also in our nutrition program. We were trying to optimize and better supply to our clients at lower costs. And we're very busy with that. You can see how much we've managed to save in cumulative cost savings over the last year. So the next slide here relates to our sustainability aspirations in brighter living solutions. We're trying to reduce our eco footprint. We're trying to reduce our impact on the environment. 65% of our portfolio and our revenues relate to products which have a lesser eco footprint than comparable competitive products. And if you look at our innovative portfolio, I would say about 90% would tick that box. 2016. Now the slides are shooting through, so CEO, I'm not even touching the button. Well, technology will have its wicked way. Annual results 2016. Then, this past year, you will have doubtless read the integrated annual report from soup to nuts. PPP is our key focus, people, planet, profit. So we want to make money, but we want to respect the planet and the people who live on it. A few highlights. 2016 was a great year for us. We set out our new strategy in 2015, and 2016 was when the strategy started to bite. 4% organic growth sales, 22% higher merger innovation sales. As you can see, adjusted EBITDA up 17%. High single digit. What does that mean? Well, that's a lot more than high single digit, isn't it? It's almost a double of what we had before. And that is something that we managed to achieve last year. Cost savings on track, 110 million. Working capital improved from 20.7 to 18.6. CapEx within guidance, and cash for operating activities up 27%. In other words, we're generating more cash. Looking at return on capital employed, the ROCE is return, as you know, on capital. It's up 280 basis points. That's up 2.8%. In other words, to 10.4%. It was 7.8 just about in 2015, which was above our cost of capital. But we thought we were going to improve by about 1% and 100 basis points. But at the end of the day, our ROCE increased by 2.8% to 10.4%. Thanks as well to a number of divestment, we managed to decrease our net debt. Looking at nutrition, strong 5% organic growth, adjusted EBITDA up 13%. What is all this due to? Well, strong volume growth, apart from in Latin America, where Brazil has turned out and persists in being a rather difficult market. So organic growth, 8% there. If you look at human nutrition, 4% up. Why is organic growth less than that? Well, there was a drop in feedstock prices, of the commodity prices. So in other words, revenue comes back. Is declines in line with the cheapening of commodity prices. Our strong performance has been reflected in higher dividends and share price. If I look at a dividend over the years, we have a dividend policy which is pretty much like a click fund. We're not going to drop our dividend, but we're trying to increase each year. The problem is, of course, if we increase each year, then we have to be very careful what we're doing, because we never want to decrease dividend yield. you can decide on dividend in just a little while. We come to that item on the agenda. So our shareholder has increased by 30% by 3 billion since the announcement of Strategy 2018, outperforming markets. So we're not looking at the next quarter, we're looking far down the road. Now, PPP, I've talked about profits, now let's talk about Planet. I was talking about 10 years, but since 2016 we've done a lot. We have improved our GHG efficiency by 4%. Our target is 25% by 2025. Our energy efficiency has improved by 2%. We've still got a long way to go there. Renewable energy, you can also read from that slide. Why are we doing all of this, you may ask? Why are we so busy to try to make the world have less CO2? Well, maybe that's because most of us agree that that's a good thing to do. Although some people think that global warming is invented by who knows. But we have heard pretty conclusive evidence that CO2 increases are generated by human beings and they must decline, otherwise bad things are going to happen. The world cannot accept this. And it's quite clear that the world will make companies to reduce their CO2 emissions. And we're doing that. We're working together with the IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations. And last years, I've worked together with the Canadian environmental minister, formerly the French environmental minister. I've worked with them in order to, with a bit of luck, we'll get this terrific prize, which is very good for our business, for our image. But at the same time, we have our own CO2 emissions, and we're doing our very best, to try to reduce those.
Innovation is very important in this context. Well, we've invited lots of people from around the world to help us because we're very strong in terms of solar energy, energy storage, which obviously is also linked to solar energy, but also all sorts of materials for the panels, the solar panels, so that we make sure that we don't return the solar energy to the sun, because the sun doesn't need that for the next few years. So we don't want that to be reflected back. And we need to absorb all the energy, make sure we store it properly, that no energy, solar energy leaks away. And then recently we said we're going to organize a Bright Minds Challenge. We have all sorts of campaigns. We're inviting scientists from all corners of the world, but particularly in this field, to share their bright minds with us. And we also want to encourage the winners with an award so that they can pursue their dreams and or cooperate with us. So we have some footage for that.
Ja, we hebben gezegd.
So we said we're not the only ones with clever ideas. We're not the only company with clever minds. But there are all sorts of clever minds with competing companies, and they're not going to share their ideas with us. But there are other people, you know, individual people, small companies, universities, or people at home who think, oh, I've got a brilliant idea as to how to improve the generation of solar energy or improve storage of solar energy. Well, then you'd have to participate. There are 55 people who felt they had a brilliant idea. From 29 countries, and they qualified for that. And we selected 10 of them, and then 3 that were shortlisted, and all 3 of them will be given a recognition. And out of the 3, in June, we will be announcing the winner. Let's just move back a bit. Can we move back one slide? So this, in terms of innovation, obviously very important in our planet objectives. People talked about that already, the engagement survey and safety. I think I covered all of them. So we can move to the next slide. So even outside DSM, we are being recognized for the hard work. The Dow Jones Sustainability Index, again, number 1 this past year, or 8 times even over the past few years. We've been number 1 for 8 years, last 12 years perhaps. 8 out of 15. So not always. We've not always been number 1. But if it's not DSM, it's extraordinary. But it's another chemical company in the Netherlands that seems to be number 1 every now and again. And sometimes a German chemical company. But we're front runners, and we're a bit proud of that. Fortune has given us the award for being one of the 50 companies that is actually changing the world. And Fortune is renowned, the Fortune 500, etc. We're just a bit too small to be incorporated in the Fortune 500, but we are part of the Fortune 50. We're proud of that. The World Food Programme, next slide, please. And this is also one of the recognitions that we get. For 10 years, we've been one of the most important partners of the World Food Programme, and we're helping more than 30 million people across the world with our cooperation, our partnership with the World Food Programme, and we're helping them get healthy nutrition. There are about 2 billion people that need our help, so with 30 million, I mean, that's just a tiny bit that we can do. But on the other hand, if a company with 25,000 people can help 30 million people, that's a lot of money as well per employee. 2016. I'd be repeating what Geraldine said this week in an interview with CNBC about the first quarter. They said to Geraldine, where are the issues? Where are the problems? Because everything is running so smoothly at DSM. And Geraldine said, well, sorry, can't help you with that. So I echo those words for 2016. Next slide. I just have a couple of slides. Innovations. So we have the cost reductions and we have the growth of the company on the one hand. And obviously everything is based on the portfolio transformation that we've had over the past few years. We've also got the future in innovation. That's very, very important to us with key products. Stevia. We have great expectations for stevia. We all know how important it is to cut back on our sugar intake with refreshments. For instance, stevia could be a good solution. Clean cow to make sure that the cows behave better in terms of methane from front to back. Fish farming, sustainable fish farming, instead of exhausting the fish in the oceans. And then also in the field of infant formula. Niagara, I mentioned that, recyclable carpet, Dyneema, high-performance fabrics, and then applications in biomedical and biomist. Coming from our innovation centers, we're producing all sorts of materials for within the human body. Should you have some parts that may want to be replaced, knees, hips, doesn't matter what, you can always knock on our door, and we will be helping you with our materials. And the longer we live, the more important this will become. And also to replace our chemicals with bio-based products. Now, in conclusion, next slide. Click, click, click. There we go. First quarter. Well, you just saw this morning's Telegraph newspaper. First quarter, once again, a very strong first quarter for DSM, a good start for 2017. We want to be cautious, of course, because it's just one quarter out of 4, so then another 3 to go. And we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the year turns out. But we've started well, kicked off well. Sales up 13%, 9% organic growth. Obviously, we outperformed the market, both in nutrition and in materials. We outperformed the market. EBITDA, this year we said, once again, high single digit, 8-9%. That's the way the market sees it. The first quarter, it was 17. So once again, almost double what we predicted. It's a good first quarter, but as I said, we've got 3 quarters to go. Might even have 7 quarters to go because our strategic plan runs until the end of 2018. ROCE, return on capital employed, that's very important. It has increased even further. Last year, we experienced quite an increase, and this year, again, we're taking a big step forward. 150 base points, 11.3%, which means about 50% more than our own cost of capital. Cash generation also increased, and of course, if everything increases, the bottom line also increases. Net profit was up. We think we're on track with DSM. We're very proud of all the changes that we generated over this past year. And this year we said we don't want a portfolio transformation. We just want to get higher returns from our own operations. We're succeeding in that. And after 2018, we want the new innovations that we're working on now to generate further growth. Thank you very much for your support over this past year and past years, I might say, because without the support of our shareholders, we will not be able to achieve all this work.
Dank je, Feike, voor deze.
Thank you, Feike, for this presentation, and thank you to all the DSM employees who worked flat out to achieve these results. I have the details of the turnout at the meeting, and I can inform you that today at this AGM, we have 1,057 shareholders present or represented. In total, they're representing a share capital of 141,106,174 shares, being 64.51% of the share capital entitled to vote. I can also inform you that the civil law notary has received a number of proxies for the resolutions and also voting instructions. This concerns a total of approximately 139 million shares, 99.01% of the capital present here at the meeting. These votes have been incorporated in the electronic voting system. As I said, we're going to be grouping the questions. We're going to proceed to agenda item 3, and after that, you can ask questions. The implementation of the remuneration policy of the Managing Board 2016, Ms. Demir Moore, the chair of the Remuneration Committee of the Supervisory Board, will give a brief presentation of the implementation of the remuneration policy for the Managing Board 2016. This presentation is based on the information of the remuneration policy that you will be able to read in the remuneration report and the explanatory notes to the financial statements. After the presentation, you have the opportunity to ask questions. So, Pauline. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. In this presentation, I would like to refer to the implementation of the remuneration plan. for the managing board. You'll find this on page 114 through page 118 and from page 199 to page 205. In 2016, the existing and unaltered remuneration policy was adopted by you at the AGM. In 2013, it was further implemented, and today I shall suffice by highlighting a number of aspects of this policy. First of all, as far as the base salary of the members of the managing board, I can point out that in January 2016, the remuneration was adjusted with 3.5% after there being no adjustment in 2015. So this increase covers a period of 2 years, 2015 and 2016, on average 1.75% per annum. Subsequently, in terms of the short-term variable remuneration for the managing board, we established that the targets that we had set for the year have been achieved. 2016, once again, as you just heard, was an excellent year for DSM, in which the managing board performed very well in all respects. And then we have the remuneration of the chairman of the managing board, and we compared that to the peer group of other companies. And based on this benchmark or this comparison, the supervisory board has established that the remuneration level of the chair has been substantially lower than the median of the peer group for a number of years, as well as compared to the Dutch AX index. The supervisory board, therefore, has decided to grant Mr. Siebesma a one-off lump sum as a pension contribution in order to compensate in part for the lower remuneration. Now, as far as the long-term variable remuneration, we've established that 33% of the conditionally granted shares has been vested, and these shares are linked to very stringent targets. And we can also establish that the supervisory board is satisfied that all the members of the managing board have substantially invested in DSM shares from their own resources, and the conversion of part of the short-term variable incentive has been invested in shares that are then kept for a longer period of time, which means that the long-term interests of respectively the shareholders and the members of the managing board are fine-tuned. Furthermore, the remuneration policy, as adopted in 2013, is up for revision, and so in the course of 2017 we'll have to take a look to see whether the remuneration policy requires any adjustments. We'll be communicating that with you, and for further details I'd like to refer you to the annual report. Thank you for that, and back to the chair. Thank you, Mr. van der Meer-Moore, for your explanation. There's now a possibility to ask questions about agenda items 2 and 3. I would like to offer you the floor. You can use the microphones. Please state your name very clearly and the organization that you represent. Who can I give the floor? Microphone B. Good afternoon. My name is Michiel van Es. I work for Robeco, and today I'll be speaking on behalf of Achmea Investment Managers, APG, Goudse, and Menzies. The strategy driving profitable growth is based on financial discipline, and this strategy is doing very well for shareholders. As shareholders, we therefore are quite satisfied that the performance of ROCE and EBITDA is above target. We would like to encourage DSM to continue to focus on EBITDA and ROCE. And because of this discipline, you're creating more space in your balance sheet. Could you indicate what you're going to do with this space or this leverage, and what your priorities will be between share buybacks and M&As and could you perhaps explain under which financial conditions you will proceed? And my third question is whether DSM has a target leverage for the balance sheet. If so, what is it? And I'll ask my other questions later on. Mr. Siebesma, please.
Question. Firstly, I would like to comment say thank you for your compliments on our financial performance. Now, we, of course, are very proud of the fact that we are increasing the cash generation of the company. And you may have noticed that in Q1 this year, we improved it already by 43%. So this is all very good news. Now, our policy when it comes to capital allocation hasn't changed and is very much in the order as follows. So, as has been hopefully well demonstrated by Mr. Sibismar next to me, we are a company that has a lot of growth potential, both in our nutrition and our materials business. And therefore, the first priority for us in terms of capital allocation is to support this organic growth. And that can come in various forms, accelerating innovation, capital investments, etc. Now, the second main priority is, of course, to be fully supportive of our dividend promise. Our policy is a stable, preferably rising dividend. And today, indeed, we already have one step up there on dividend. Hopefully that will be approved today. And the third priority, when time comes, will be to do some M&A. Now, we introduced a strategic period of 3 years. That was a year and a half ago. As you know, it's the year 16, 17, and 18, where the focus has indeed been to improve the financial performance, reorganize the company, and really maybe take a little bit of time following a big transformation phase to reorganize ourselves and be very organized. So M&A has not been a particularly strong focus at this stage, but in due course will probably become part of our growth strategy as well. And fourthly, should there be no value-creating opportunities for us to deploy capital in the interest of our shareholders and all stakeholders, then it is never barred or impossible that we would do some sort of cash return to shareholders, but very much as a fourth alternative. So that is to your first question in terms of capital allocation. Now, when it comes to leverage, as you were saying, given this context of growth, while it is indeed right that we are improving our cash generation, we believe that it is very wise to retain some flexibility in order to be able to continue to grow this company. And as such, we don't have a firm leverage target per se. And we'll continue to be focusing on making sure that we deliver both cash-generating growth and businesses that can continue to grow into the future.
All right. Volgende, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Stevens, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stevens. I'm from the Foundation of Legal Protection of the Investors. Well, on behalf of my organization, I'd like to thank you for your efforts. Well, late March, you had to evict the offices because the earth was moving. Quite biblical. But the Ministry of Economic Affairs had already announced a study because of the level of the ground level was increasing. We thought that was strange. It must have been a mistake. I think it was subsidence. The level was dropping. Well, anyway, with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, you're going to start a study into changes in the structure of the Earth. What could be the implications for DSM? Would we be facing a situation such as in Groningen? At this point in time, the estimate is that the damages are to the tune of 10,000s of euros. So do you have an estimate of these costs, or who's going to pay for these costs for the damages of earthquakes and the likes? And are you insured against this? And you talked about the solar panel company, solar panel business. So you want to develop something in order to avoid any leakage of solar energy. Are you talking about connections between the panels, or are you talking about a layer underneath the panels? There were a few problems in Brazil, and the court ruled in your favor, but we couldn't find any information as to whether the opposing party lodged an appeal or not. And I would like to hear from you whether there any. Could you repeat? Where was this? Brazil, says Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens, could you please repeat what the problem was? Mr. Stevens. Oh, meat. Problem with meat in Brazil. There were a couple of issues there, but we were not able to find out whether there were any subsequent steps and what the financial impact was. Could you tell us more about the state of play of the lactose infringement in which the court ruled in your favor? Those are my questions, I think, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. You're concerned about the earth moving. I think that just goes to show that DSM is doing well, and you're not worried about that. Mr. Stevens, well, you say you want to increase dividend. I was here 25 years ago, and the managing board at the time had the same idea, and I disagreed. And what I said happened. So I must say that my situation has improved in the meantime. Mr. Siebesma. Yes, the earth that is moving upwards or downwards, well, this concerns two things. We recently said that as far as this building is concerned, we will have a temporary eviction of one of the sections of the building. We don't need to worry. We don't need to worry about this, because possibly there would be a bit of subsidence in one of the wings or one of the sections of the building, and that is due to the former mining operations, not our mining operations, but another company that used to mine here that has a very royal name, but I'm not going to comment on that. That also caused the hole in the building opposite our building at the time, and in order to rule out any risk, we evicted one of the wings of the building on a temporary basis, and we will be doing some repairs, and before the end of the year we will have solved the problem. That's the way the situation looks, with a minimum of a financial impact. And furthermore, for the entire province of Limburg, we're looking into subsidence as a consequence of former mining activities. 50 years ago, we closed the last mine, so that's quite some time ago. So people who feel the earth move, all of a sudden, well, we have a separate committee that's going to look into that and is going to try to find out how come, because these mining operations were stopped 50 years ago. It's not about tens of millions, just couple of million perhaps for the operations here and the rest of Limburg, so it's not that bad. Solar panels, could you deal with that one? Yes, the solar panels. Well, we're trying to do something at the top and the bottom of the panels. It's all about the returns of the panels itself. We don't want to reflect the sunlight at the top and the back of the panels. We want to make sure that the solar cells can perform at maximum level, and we don't have any energy seeping away. Brazil, the meat situation, correct. That's a shame for Brazil because the economy is going through tough times, and meat is a very important export product for Brazil, and these scandals have an enormous impact on Brazilian export business, the export to China particularly, that is now taken over by other countries. In the first quarter, we were hardly impacted by that. Geraldine, I think perhaps in the second quarter it's about 20 million in sales that there's a risk there. Compared to 2 billion in sales that we have per annum, it's a limited impact. So you could see some impact in the second quarter. When will that be solved? We don't know. It'll depend to a certain extent on the Brazilians, because it's not about us. It's about the meat operations that we're a supplier of. So obviously we have every interest in solving the situation as quickly as possible. And it also depends on the importing countries, China, whether they're pleased with the result. Lactose infringement, yes, indeed. Particularly in our enzyme operations, there are all sorts of companies that compete with us and that infringe patents. And Of course, we defend ourselves, and our legal expert here in the second row is laughing, and very often we're successful. And that way we prohibit people to use our patents. The patents are ours. We want to do it ourselves. Well, about those patents. What is the duration of a patent? Because just the other day I visited ASML. I think 16 to 20 years, but you can apply for an extension. But this is a very tricky issue. So I would look at my colleague here on the first row here, 16 to 20 years. So if you really want to know, we can give you a more specific answer. But if you can apply a modification, you can apply again, and then you can get a protection for dozens of years, really. I think what I'm saying is true. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And then at the back, microphone number 1. Well, I just have to move this around because I'm almost sitting on the lap of my neighbor here, and she hasn't invited me to sit on her lap. Anyway, my name is Decker, and today I will be representing the Association of Stockholders, the VEB. In fact, I have the following questions. In the different segments, market segments that you have, how do you view your economy of scale? I mean, in a consolidating world, I would imagine that you may have some weak spots that may be supplemented by means of acquisitions at some point. Perhaps you can point out in a table in your next annual report what your number 1, 2, and 3 positions are. That is, if you have such positions in the different segments, and perhaps you can explain where you have these positions. Because your competitive positions may have changed in the years of crisis. Competitors may have turned out weaker. You may have emerged stronger. That's my first question. And second question is, well, you have a wonderful company now. You've cleaned it all up, and with excellent results for the period from 2015, 2018 that are exceeding our expectations. Don't you think you can accelerate growth now that you've sorted everything out so nicely? And I'm, of course, thinking of a potential threat of a takeover. You have a pot of gold in the value of the 3 joint ventures, plus the pipeline in R&D, which is exceedingly attractive. So the question really is, and I would echo the words of Rebecca here, that the cash that you're generating, what are you going to do with that in the shorter term? I think those were my questions. I'll be back later on for some subsequent questions. Thank you very much. Excellent questions. These are questions that the Supervisory Board asks itself quite regularly. Okay, in this closed meeting of Supervisory Board, I shall share the following information with you. Economies of scale. Well, in all the business that we operate in, we pertain to the top 3 players, and that is precisely our goal. We're less interested in being a certain business if that business has a number 7, 8, or 10 position. Of course, you might then say, how do you define the market segments? If you define them in such a way that you are a market leader, and we're quite good at doing that and defining things that way. Nonetheless, we're trying to be as objective as possible in this respect. In nutrition worldwide, by far, we are indeed the leader in terms of human nutrition, animal nutrition, and in the field of materials. in most of the segments, and I'm looking at Dimitri, in any case, we are a top 3 player, and sometimes depending a bit on how you define your products, and sometimes we're number 1, but in any case, we're in the top 3, which is precisely what we also try to accomplish for the new business, biomedical. These are small companies, but I think that we're in the top 3 worldwide there. So in general, we're a top 3 player. Will we show this in a table in the annual report? No, we won't, unfortunately, because we don't want to disclose our market shares, nor do we want to say how much market share the competitor has, in our opinion. We do have an opinion. We may be wrong, we may not be wrong, but that could be interesting information for competitors to know how we feel about them, if you can follow my line of thought. So anyway, we don't want to share that information for competition reasons. Accelerating growth. I would like to interrupt you. Who are your main competitors in nutrition then? In nutrition, that would be BASF, depending a bit on how you define it. Food specialist, it would be Chr. Hansen and Novozymes, DuPont, and then a series of smaller businesses. Those are the main competitors. Growth, accelerating growth. I jotted down the question and then I added a question mark. And by that I meant, what is it that you mean by that? My God, we're showing such impressive growth. This quarter, we are growing twice as fast as the market. And there's something extraordinary that goes on in the market. If you outperform the market, that means that you're gaining market share and the prices are not going down, which is a trick. Of course, you grow faster than the market and the prices don't go down. That's always a risk. To accelerate the growth, well, I'm going to pass it on because I absolutely agree with you. But, to be very honest, I really think that we're growing rather fast. Well, of course, I'm thinking about acquisitions. You wanted to freeze that in 2015 to 2018, but after the situation at Unilever and AXA, the question is whether that is an intelligent thing to do. Well, Unilever and AXA, they'll have to speak for themselves. I can only speak on behalf of DSM, and I said that for 10 years, and I was there for those 10 years, we worked really hard in changing our portfolio. We bought a lot of business. We sold a lot of business. If you sell and buy businesses, that means that you're almost continuously carving out businesses, setting them aside, selling them, integrating acquisitions. That's a lot of hard work. And at that time, it's very difficult for a business to keep an eye on your costs, to keep an eye on organic growth. So I think that what we did was spot on. Well, I was one of the people who took the decision. Perhaps also my colleagues here at the supervisory board helped take that decision. Decision to stand still for a while with respect to acquisitions and also to start this growth process. And Rebecca complimented on that just now. And that has proven to be a good decision because you always have to handle all these things at the same time. But you're quite right about that. There is a certain point that you have to start looking at acquisitions, and particularly once we've divested joint ventures, we will have the financial space to make acquisitions, and that'll be back on the agenda. And I think with the strategy that we have right now, it's just a matter of time.
Yes, I just missed about this competition and how things went with your competitors during the years of crisis. Well, the answer to that, I'm just having a quick think about what we were doing 10 years ago and 5 years ago. I'm trying to review all of that, look through all the different businesses we've owned. I would say that if you look how DSM has managed to position itself and has turned out to be a winner, look back at DSM 10 years ago when 2007, 2008, when the crisis started, when we were asking ourselves what we should do. We were in petrochemicals. We were the 12th in the world, 5th in Europe, and we were in a whole slew of businesses, but we weren't a leader in any of those sectors. So I actually think that we have powered through with increased strength. Any other questions? Mr. Spania. Yes. I'd just like to congratulate the CEO, Mr. Siebesma, for 10 years in charge. But I see in the Dutch FT that apparently it says that you're still in the chemicals business. But you're not, are you? I thought we'd sent that a few years back. Shouldn't you get your PR guys to check this out a bit, check their facts? Now, questions then, because that's why we're here. I always find the CEO's letter a fascinating piece of literature. On pages 8 and 9, you are talking about the 3 joint ventures. And you sort of say over time, but you don't really say how long. And you don't actually say much about the contacts with these putative acquisition parties to be acquired. You don't really say anything about the time. You don't say who they are. Do they want to sell? And then we see in the letter from the CEO, we see that staff that between 2015 and 2017 there's going to be 1,000, or is that 2,000 people that you're going to shed? And yet earlier on I see that only very few people have actually been left the business. So what are you going to do if you only shed 6 out of this 1,000? How are you going to get rid of the other 994 this year? Because you're a man of action when you do what you say and you say what you do. So that's not clear. I think it's a pity that you didn't make it clear. And animal nutrition, you were saying that cows, cows and their emissions, which side does it come out of worst? I don't know. It's a terrible situation here. And if you speak to farmers about this, farmers aren't using your feed stuff, your clean cow products. Why not? My next question. Last year, you came up with some new paint. How's this new paint faring? Surely you can't be competitive against AXO or those people that AXO wishes to take over. So how's it working out with the paint business? And then once again in the Dutch FT, it says DSM is reasonably protected against any hostile bids. What does that mean? Is it going to be like Unilever? That you're going to do something on the basis of Unilever, a 6-month cooling off period or whatever? Says the chairman of the meeting of the supervisory board. Well, it's nice that we get these questions from the press and that you can pick them up and put them to us. I think it's rather fortuitous that this comes up. Unfortunately, you will be aware that we are unable to control the headlines in the newspapers. The CEO takes the microphone and says, we do absolutely everything we can to not appear to be a chemical company, and certainly not, even worse, a chemical company out of Limburg, says the CEO jokingly. No, what we are trying to do is to communicate. The head of our PR department, communications department, is in close contact with the press, and is trying to update things as closely as possible. And the headlines in the Dutch FT that we are relatively well protected against hostile takeovers, that's not a quotation from me. It's the FT, the Dutch FT, thinking this up. And the Financiële Dagblad have got their own editorial policy. Dimitri, do you want to say something about paint and the 1,000 people who are allegedly going to leave? Dimitri says, let's start with the figures. We've got 21,000 people working for DSM. The reorganization that we're doing in order to make DSM, let it grow and punch above its weight, has to do with global support functions, HR, IT, etc. And we haven't got 21,000 people in there. We've got 4,000 people working in those sectors. And the idea is to bring it down to 3,000 people, the support areas. Why are we going to do that? Well, we thought we could improve matters. We could benchmark a best-in-class quality there with the appropriate cost. So there will be 1,000 people from HR, finance, IT, communication who will leave. We have also a number of people working in marketing, sales, R&D, etc., in order to promote this growth, which is twice the market growth. So we are reducing headcount there where we think we can improve, but where we can continue the growth. So that's about the figures. Now, about paint. Paint, you will recall the discussions last year, and we said that it's quite strange that DSM is going into paint because we are actually selling products that the clients that your clients are selling. And it was a good question at the time. Maybe even you put it. But we said once you introduce a new innovation into the market, a bio-based product, you have to take the vanguard here. We launched it with Praxis. It's called Discovery Perfection. It's not going brilliantly, but it's being sold well. This bio-based paints are really the very next step that has to be taken in order to make a lower environmental footprint with respect to coatings. It's been picked up in America, it's been picked up in Italy, and that is what we wanted. We have given a signal to the market, and the market has picked it up. And that's the reason why we did this, not because we wanted to become ourselves big, major paint producers. Thank you very much, Dimitri, says CEO. Joint ventures. Well, we think in the years to come. It hasn't been clearly defined in terms of time. It could be this year. It could be next year. And it might even take until 2019. If you look at the CVC joint venture with caprolactam, we think in our planning, put it this way, our planning doesn't run much beyond 2020. Now, we have a bit of flexibility in our timings. Why did we say that? Well, because the value that we want to get out of these is more important than the actual time when we make the move. And the partners, also the three partners agree with that. There's a Chinese public company and a number of government company, and a couple of private firms. Now, what about farmers? Yes, farmers who don't know us. Well, I think that's terrible. I agree with you. Farmers should know us and they should buy our products. But the thing is, they don't necessarily know DSM, but they do know the premixes that we sell. Our brands are very often much better known to consumers than us who make them. Because about 2 to 3 billion euros are coming in from this sector of our business. Obviously, a few people do know us, a few farmers do on our names, but it's via the people who actually supply animal nutrition. And the brands of animal feed that farmers buy are probably better known to the farmers than the people who make the ingredients, such as us. So I agree. It would be a good idea to make ourselves better known in the whole production and value chain. That would be a very good idea. I agree with you. Adrian Berkelder here. I've got two questions for you. One financial and one about products. Page 137. You can see inventories and trade receivables. They have increased by 10%. And if you look at sales only gone up 10%, isn't that quite a lot? Your predecessor, Miss Matchett, tried to have inventories about the 15% level. That was always felt to be ambitious, but now I see inventories at 23%. If you take these two items and you could bring them down to a lower level, you would be able to save €500 million in capital. That would be pretty good, wouldn't it? This is inventories and trade receivables. So what are your ambitions in this respect? I'd like to encourage them. Second question for Mr. Vreese. New products. Is DSM busy with new products? For example, artificial kidneys and artificial organs. Because we hear a lot about filters that can be inserted in the human body. Could you say something about that? Geraldine, would you like to start off on this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for your question. I fully agree with you that, of course, the aim of the game is to try and have as big a business as we can have with tying up as little capital as possible. And this is exactly the reason why we set two very important targets for ourselves. One is increasing EBITDA, so the earnings, but the second one is improving our return on capital employed. Now, the capital employed includes the inventory, the receivables, the payables, etc. And we take it together, and it has to be proportional to the size of the company. So, as Mr. Sibbersmark correctly pointed out earlier in his presentation, we had a significant increase in our return on this capital employed. So, the good news is we're absolutely heading in the right direction. Now, I'm with you that would we like to do even better? Absolutely. And that is one of the big objectives, and it's actually embedded in the targets of many people in our company, is to bring down what we call our working capital. And that is, it's not a one-man or one-woman show. It's really much a very big team working on this, and it will continue to be a big focus.
Dimitri?
Ja, ik ben blij te horen dat u aan deze...
Well, I'm very happy that you think about DSM when you're talking about innovative materials. But I don't really know anything about this particular point. There are developments, possibly, but if you combine that with the fact that we are always open to new business, new innovations, so maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that when we have the aperitif after the AGM. Yes. Next question in the back. Microphone D. Frank Ottener. I'm from the VBDO. It's the Association for Investors in Sustainable Development. We are all about sustainable development and performance for investors and for companies. So we're very happy to see in your integrated annual report, because you talk very clearly about your ambitions in terms of sustainability related to your own operations and the Brighter Living Solutions, your products, in other words, and the impact on the world as a whole. We'd like to compliment DSM for everything that you've done here, which has given you recognition in the DJ Sustainability Index. So our 3 questions relate to sustainability of your company. Number 1, we'd like to see a profit and loss account related to the social and economic spheres. In 2016, DSM committed itself to the developing of a externality of social and environmental capital. You can see that page 34. In other words, it's the invisible impact on society and the world. If you monitorize it, then it becomes visible. DSM has also participated in a pilot with the National Capital Coalition with the aim to identify the impact of companies on natural capital. I see that on page 27. Now, we are very interested in the VBD on this. We've got 2 sub-questions on it. DSM has made some contributions to the monetization of these issues. How has that progress been going? What kind of problems have you encountered there? And the second question, the sub-question, let me say, relates to natural capital. You have got ambitious targets for CO2 emissions on page 10, and you can see that this is based and implemented, but could you please tell us, are you going to roll this out across the company and turn it into an environmentally based profit and loss account? AXO has tried to do this. Will you be doing it? My second question is how do you assess natural capital in risk assessment? You're aware of the possible negative effects you have on natural capital. Companies recognise, or as you do on pages 26 and 27, that your impact on the climate, diversity, etc., as you do on page 47. To identify the risks involved here, which may be impacted by your operations, should surely be part and parcel of risk assessment. We don't think in the VBDO it's not clear to us how you do this. We would like more transparency and insight. So, natural capital and how that is weighed up in your risk assessment. You have a whole chapter, but you don't mention natural capital in the risk assessment chapter at all. Can DSM also identify the major risks impacting on natural capital and work out the weighting to which you give to these points? The third point relates to sustainable goals, the SDGs that we've heard of. One of the central issues of it, and which relates to VBDO, is that it's very important that you should achieve some of these SDGs. We'd like to compliment your company because you really have recognized the value of the SDGs with 5 focus areas. But it doesn't really seem that you're linking these with the strategy of DSM. They seem to be only retrospectively linked because your strategy, of course, was evolved before the SDGs themselves. But we think you should try to establish more clearer and more specific targets for SDGs and how you relate to them in the mid and long term. And report about this, of course. Thank you. Well, says the chairman, thank you very much for your focus on this important sector of our annual report. The CEO takes the floor and says, well, I'm hoping that Dimitri and others will say their bit if I get something wrong here. I'm going to start anyhow. I'm going to start. Well, first of all, thanks very much for your questions and your comments. We know the VBDO extremely well. We know the people, the predecessors, your predecessors. You keep us on our toes, and we appreciate that. And we value the exchanges we have outside these kind of meetings. Now, reporting. Clearly, this is important. And if to give you an overall answer to your general question, we try to do as much as we possibly can with other companies, because if everybody is using its own personal paradigm and own reporting methods, then you can't compare our figure with everybody else's. So we try to have the same definitions with other companies about what we're doing. But that's a long road. It's a hard road to hoe, indeed, to get the ducks in a row here. And that makes reporting difficult. I think as well, hopefully one day it will be better in the future. But it all depends on initiatives right now. Dimitri, would you like to field a few questions here? Let me say, says Dimitri, I noted 4 questions. Maybe there were even more than that. And sub-questions, of course. Let's start with the first one. The monetarization of social issues. I don't really know whether you can say monetarization in Dutch, but we will try to use it. Maybe it's a neologism. Anyhow, it is a new concept for us, and we are experimenting with it. As Feike said that, we're not doing it on our lonesome. We're trying to do that together with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and other companies who have hitched their wagon to this idea. The social issues, of course, it would be very helpful if we could monetize them. We think issues such as safety, skills building, training, and better training, better availability within the labour market. We think that would be a very good thing. These are important components of social issues, and we would like to make them more transparent. We are looking at possibilities of how to realise this, but we are in the learning part of the curve here, and we're looking around ourselves to see how, in collaboration with other people, we could make this more transparent. I hope that's the answer to your first question. Then you're talking about carbon prices and carbon footprint, and how we could make a accountability of sustainability and build that into our profit and loss. Geraldine, do you think you would like to field that question?
Thank you, Dimitri. Firstly, thank you very much for your questions. And I have to say that out there, we are definitely a company which is known as being very active in this space and very engaged in the conversation. Feike is absolutely right that one of the biggest dangers is if every corporate tries to reinvent the wheel themselves. And amongst others, we are a member of something called A4S, Accounting for Sustainability, under the guise of the Prince of Wales, where I'm a very active member of the CFO network, where we are working through these complexities of coming up with a methodology which works for many companies, but also is relevant to the investors. Otherwise, it's a nice side conversation that never truly becomes part of the business equation and the profit and loss, as we would like it to be truly embedded in what we're doing. So we're certainly striving to move forward, but it is indeed a bit of an arduous journey. Now, at this stage, in terms of the carbon pricing, the big step that we did do is introduce the €50 per ton price on carbon to already at least future-proof our decision-making. And that is very much extensively used now in the company. We do not make an investment decision without including a scenario where we say, what if there was a real cost of carbon of 50? Would we still make this decision today? So that is a very important part. Now we're looking at how to take this even further, but we are reluctant to go down a self-created approach. Otherwise, it will come back and haunt us later, where we'll put a lot of energy and effort into something which is not alignable with any other corporate, and then other stakeholders will say, well, thank you very much, but honestly, we don't know how to compare it and read it. Hence, a lot of work with the WBSD, with the Carbon Disclosure Program, with indeed the Carbon Coalition, but also the Task Force on Climate Disclosures that are coming up with some new disclosures, suggestions very soon, if that is supported this summer, which will again raise the standards and create a broad, big discussion around this. So it's a very alive subject within DSM, but we want to be connected to all the different parties involved in this to make it a sustainable way forward. Oh yes, maybe while Dimitri, I'll just jump in here on your second question on risk assessment. So as you know, we have a very comprehensive risk framework. So we have risk assessments done within all the units. We have audit committees within those units, and they sign a letter of representation. Within that, natural capital is an element of the risk assessment. So that's an important part. Then we do the top-down. So we do a risk assessment more from the board down. And of course, we have the materiality matrix, which is our external mirror to make sure that the risks we see are actually matched by the risks that other people see around us. Now, what we've added in this process this year is to put a correlation between risks, try to start linking better, because it's true that in the past the risk assessment were very individual. So there were people risks, planet risks, financial risks, but not really trying to tie them together. We're walking along the journey of trying to make those links so that in the future it will be clearer what a capital or natural capital risk may translate into financial risks or people risk into capital, etc. So it is also a progression there, and we're with you that would be a very good way to go forward as we progress.
3 nog additionele antwoorden op...
Well, a few answers here. You say DSM has moved forward to make more measurable these measurement side of our businesses, but we're pulling it all together with the Eco Plus. We're trying to align things exactly as you suggested, to bring externalities into the equation. But the question is how you do that. Not many companies have been able to make progress in these social issues. We've managed to do that. How you can have the input on the health and well-being of people, local living conditions of people, and we measure that. We do measure that. We have clear definitions for that. We've communicated that to not only our own opcos but also to our competitors, so to speak. We've done a bit of homework for other people working in the same sector so that we can all talk about the same things in a discussion. So how to measure, how to report. With respect to CO2, this €50 per tonne is what we use internally. Nobody's paying that. It's a kind of shadow accounting, but it does have an impact of our investment, as you have heard, because when we talk about future investments, we calculate as if we were paying €50 per tonne of CO2. So, of course, this has a negative impact on your profitability, or you have to enormously reduce CO2 emissions. Then that has a very positive impact. So that's a driver, if you like. And the last element, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 5 of those that we've taken over from the UN. Emissions, for example, we have a clear, measurable target there, but also, if you look at nutrition, we have said that it would be great if we could reach 1 million people via the World Food Programme. Already we've got to more than 2 million. It would be good if we could get to 10 million. But we think we could reach 30 to 50 million over the years to come. It's more and more difficult to meet everybody's needs, but we are going to report about that too. I do hope, says the Chair, that I've answered all your questions here. It would be good if we could sort of make questions succinct, because we've been 2 hours down the road here and we've still got a lot to do. We're only on item number 3. From the back. Case Bucker. I'd like to refer to page 163. That's Poet and DSM. I base myself on a number of assumptions that you've got through the teething phase here. Are we making any money out of the Poet DSM? Because total assets were almost 300 million in 2016. That's quite a lot of cash, isn't it? And secondly, there are a number of assumptions that are made here on about the grain ethanol price and about the US renewable fuel standard subsidy. Now, well, I mean, given that we've got Mr. Trump in America, what's it going to look like maybe after 2022? Says the aunt, says the CEO. Well, we thought we could use agricultural waste to make fuel. We did that. We set up a factory. We've got a biofuels joint venture up and working. And I was asked at the time, what do you think the oil price is going to be over the years to come? And at the time I said, well, I reckon it's going to be $75 to $80 a barrel. Everybody thought that wasn't very ambitious. Everybody thought that it was going to be much more, or at least stay at $75 to $80. But you've seen what's happened to the oil price. So we've been less competitive, and secondly, we had a lot of teething troubles because we had to this waste that we were bringing into the factory for processing was truffled with stone and sand and stuff we couldn't use. Now, we've managed to resolve these problems, and for a few months now, things have been working better. We've upgraded our enzyme and yeast technology, and Poet, who's the other owner of 50%, is using our yeast and enzymes. So that shows that we are pretty competitive there. We do hope that in the foreseeable future that we're going to get to the break-even point in this business. We're not there yet. Why? Well, because we're going to have to scale the whole thing up. And then we're hoping to make money out of licenses. We hope to sell licenses to Asia, because we think that they're going to want to make biofuels from their waste too. So it's not only about the factory, and the value is not only in the factory and not only in America. Of course, the renewable food standards, of course, are important in America. It's important for the factory, but it's not important for the value of the factory, because that's going to be predicated on licenses. Now, you hear a lot of rumours. We'll see what the EPA is going to do. For the time being, it seems that things don't look so bad, because every year the standards set by the EPA in legislation about how much biofuel has to be produced is always a good deal higher than the current production. So all is well. But if the picture changes, who knows how it's going to pan out? I can't tell you. Because a lot of the farmers in Iowa, where we are supplying, are going to be involved. These farmers are really happy that we come and pick up their trash.
Yeah.
It's clear that you never know what politicians have in store for you. And there are lots of votes in the Midwest that lots of these farmers and ethanol farmers want to continue with their business. And if you do something about it, it could be political suicide. Yes, that's clear. Your study is entirely being carried out in the US. Mr. Siebesma, no, I'm looking at Rob. No, most of the study is being carried out in Delft. And the only plant that we have in this field is in Iowa, in the US. I'm not supposed to say in the middle of nowhere, but I will say the middle of the Corn Belt. Let me put it that way. But they're not very large cities in the surroundings there, and it takes a while to get there. But hey, research is taking place in Delft, particularly. It was my impression last year when we talked about this subject that the study had been moved to the US because of the high level of subsidies that you could get there. So I was going to ask you what the situation was and also what the situation is in the future, also in view of Mr. Trump. I don't know how the biofuel market will develop in the US, as Mr. Siebesma, and you can read all about it in the newspaper, the climate and energy policy in the US, but I'm not quite sure where the biofuels is going to suffer from that. We'll have to wait and see. Perhaps other alternative energy sources sooner than biofuels. I mean, there are also reasons not to impact on biofuels in any case, because in the long term, we think it's going to be more competitive and it's going to lead to 80 to 90% carbon reduction as compared to gasoline, etc., etc. So, well, and it's not only about our interest in the US, it's a plant. I mean, it's a bit too big to call it a test case because it's almost 300 million, 150 million of the money is ours. So it's a bit of a big test, if you will. But we are showing in this plant that the concept that we've developed to that effect is working. And so that's important for companies in China, India, other parts of the world, that we not only have technology, but that we actually have proven technology and we can show them that it works. We can invite them over, and there are lots of countries that want to process their own agricultural waste for environmental reasons, for competitive reasons. And if I look at those countries and if I read the science properly, it's also for reasons of independence, because there are lots of countries that are importing gasoline and do have a lot of waste, agricultural waste, and they don't want to be importing fuel. They want to be independent from an energy point of view. So that is important from a political point of view. So there is a future there indeed. Thank you and good luck. I just wanted to say a few words about sustainability performance and being a sector leader in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and the Sustainable Goals. Now, my question really is, what are your long-term ambitions for the iHealth ambition or division, sorry? And then another question about the implementation of remuneration policy for 2016. We would like companies to offer financial and sustainability targets in the remuneration policy, and that also befits a company such as DSM. At the same time, for shareholders, it's also very important to be able to evaluate the performance regarding those targets. And for sustainability targets, it's very difficult to do that. And it's important that the Remuneration Committee communicates properly as to how the targets are structured and how you determine to which extent the targets have been achieved, at target, below target, or above target. And I'm talking about LTI targets, energy efficiency improvement. And I have two questions in this respect. Could you give us more details on the way in which those sustainability targets have been compounded, and how do you determine whether or not these targets have been met, and would it be possible to give us more details in your next annual report regarding this matter? Let me first ask Mr. Siebesma to answer iHealth. the eye health question. Mr. Siebesma, eye health. Actually, eye health are humane consumer products, really. We've got a number of brands. We call them brands in Dutch because if you have a consumer business, I know that from other operations, that is the jargon that you use. We have a couple of brands. Culturelle is the largest one, probiotics, particularly in the US. And our eye health operations are growing double-digit. And we ended up with it by coincidence because we ended up with it after the Matec acquisition, and we thought long and hard, what should we do with it? And then we said we've got to really work with it because it's a quickly growing business and we can introduce our own ingredients in the market this way, and we can also give a branding to omega-3 fish oil and so on. So that is going very well, and we even want to roll it out at an international level. Our eye health operations particularly are in the US now, but we want to roll it out in the rest of the world, first Asia and then Europe. And this has got to do with an interest in the market, and China will be the first country in which we will also be rolling out our eye health operations. Now, the LTI, Geraldine, would you like to say a few words about that? Or Pauline, sorry. Yes, of course, we try to determine those targets in a very sensible way, and we also try to find meaningful targets. Now, that means that sometimes we don't shy away from establishing targets that we cannot entirely disclose for reasons that have to do with sensitivity. And this has got to do with our long-term incentive. The two sustainability targets that we have here, there's one that cannot be really derived by third parties, and that's got to do with the fact that those targets are related to our cost base. And should you be able to retrieve that information retrieve that information, you'd end up with disclosing this information. We want to be very careful with that. So we want to use these targets because they're very important. So we're not shying away from that. So we're trying to find a sort of middle-of-the-road solution, having one target in which we can clearly disclose what exactly the targets are, and one target in which we try to publish at a more aggregated level what the purposes and what the realization levels are, and obviously they also contain financial aspects. The LTI, well, you were not referring to that, but as such, I do agree with you. As a remuneration committee, we also agree with you. The more transparent you are in setting your targets, and the easier it is to evaluate performance, the better it is. So we will also try to work on this and see how we can make this even clearer in the future. Ms. van der Meermoor says, and I would like to add to this, that this is understandable for competitive reasons. Page 117 of the annual report for greenhouse gases, you'll find our reductions. In earlier pages in the annual report, you'll find it for greenhouse gases and energy efficiency. You'll find the targets that we have set for ourselves as a company. So you can take it from me that the targets that we've established for ourselves as a company, that we simply report in the annual report in which we disclose our progress in that respect, have a quite a stringent relationship with the targets that apply for remuneration policy. The supervisory board, of course, has all the information. Ms. van der Meermoor explains why we can't always disclose it, but they're quite well aligned to the ordinary targets that we report on, and obviously the auditor also sees them and signs off on them. And if you interpret the information of the previous pages on our own targets, I would venture to say that you would be able to reconstruct it quite nicely. Mr. Stevens, you can't wait for any other business? You really have to ask this question now? Okay, well, go ahead then. A couple of short questions. First of all, and it has been discussed, the protection of DSM. We absolutely support you and support the way DSM is protected against hostile takeovers. There's one of our people who's with a company that is certified, and we're against that. And this business is saying we want to be certified because we do business with China and also because we're afraid of being taken over. So we would like to hear your views about this. because you're not certified, but you do business with China, and we're assuming that you don't have any issues there. My other point then, in conclusion, you're writing about recyclable carpets. Now, we would like to know a bit more about this. How do you do this? How do you pick up the carpet? How do these machines work? Do you process them into raw material? What do you do? We would like to know a bit more about that. Chairman, about anti-takeover protection. Well, there are all sorts of opinions about that, but if I could please very concisely, and don't start explaining the entire process of these carpets. No, by the way, Dimitri will be doing that, says Mr. Siebesma. And after this guidance, I'm sure he's going to be very brief. Well, we don't have any certificates or depository receipts, and as you know, some companies have that. And well, you'll read more about this in the annual report, and the Financial Times or the Dutch Financial Times says that we're reasonably protected. Well, they're entitled to their opinion. As management and as supervisory board, we are working on a clear strategy which we want to communicate properly and to have very sharp targets and disclose that. And I think we'll do well. We'll be fine as a company. Dimitri. Yes. Perhaps very briefly about Niagara, the recyclable carpet. I'll be concise, as I said. People very often make a mistake and they think about recycling at the end of the process, and then it's very difficult. The same applies to carpet. Carpet consists of 7 layers, 7 different components or raw materials. If you want to recycle them, you have to separate them and then recycle them in 7 separate ways. Now, the power of Niagara, we have a polyester and a polyamide, and we have a polyamide or polyester packing and glue and intermediate film, which means that you can recycle it very easily because it's just simply one single material, and it goes into a machine. If you have a bit of carpet and you want to put a new carpet in your living room, the carpet is removed from your living room, goes into the machine, it is chopped up, and then you have these granules come out, and with these granules you can make a new carpet. Now that is, in a nutshell, what happens, because it really consists of one material. Now, we introduced this in the US with our large customer, Mohawk, in order to test it to see whether what we said was true. Now we're rolling that out now, and it will be introduced in Europe pretty soon, and you'll be certainly hearing more about Niagara and the carpets. Okay, so you have an opportunity to take part in the sales of DSM. I saw one more question from Mr. Decker, but then we're going to stop the questions after that. Mr. Decker, please go ahead. Well, actually, I have the following question. May also be linked to a possible vulnerability of DSM. How much synergy is there between materials and nutrition? Thank you for your question, says Mr. Siebesma. Well, you could answer this question, or you could say, why this portfolio of life sciences, material sciences, etc.? Our answer to that question is very straightforward. DSM is, par excellence, a business that never declared any business sacrosanct. And we've shown this in the course of our history of 10 years. We can divest businesses if there's no added value that we can generate there. And we've done that on several occasions. Now, we believe that both in our materials business and in our lifestyles business, we can add value and that we can have these businesses grow rather rapidly. And we've shown this. Now, this is the first part of the answer to your question. I think that's more important than really to go into the intricacies of the synergies between businesses. There is a synergy: people, technology, chemistry, biotechnology, operations, sourcing, funding. There are all sorts of synergies. Financial synergies, knowledge synergies, as well as operational synergies that can be identified. But I'm going to repeat what I said more important than the synergies is to see whether as an owner you can add value to the business. If you can't do that, you have to think twice, and I think we can add value. A second question is, what is more or less your revenue in licenses of all your products worldwide? Well, Mr. van Leenen knows this number by heart, and the number is, oh, he doesn't know it by heart. Nor do I. I don't think it's very high. Oh, Jos knows. It's a small amount. Jos thinks that it is in the order of magnitude of 10 million. We don't have a large license business. Well, I would hope, says the gentleman, that it can grow further. Mr. Siebersma, absolutely. And we just said this when we talked about Poet. That has to become our license business. And we have new businesses that also consist of licenses. Our current business has a limited business model based on licenses. Thank you. And we can now proceed to item 4 of the agenda, which is the Financial Statements 2016, which is presented to the General Meeting of Shareholders. The Financial Statements 2016 was approved by the Supervisory Board on 2 March 2017. You'll find the financial statements and further details from page 129 onwards of the annual report. The financial statements 2016 have been audited by the auditor, and the opinion has been included on page 206 through 2010. I'd like to give Mr. van Wooster, the auditor, the opportunity to answer any questions or give a short presentation and then answer questions regarding the audit of KPMG. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Erik Wooster. I'm the auditor of KPMG. I'm in charge of the audit of DSM. We are, or have been, DSM's auditor since 2015. I shall explain our audit and our opinion, and yes, we're moving on to the next slide. We have audited the individual and the consolidated financial statements of DSM, and we performed work with respect to sustainability. And my presentation concerns the opinion to the financial statements. The final product of our audit is the opinion, and we've issued an unqualified opinion, which means that the financial statements reflect the actual situation, is in accordance with IFRS and Part 9 of Book 2 of the Dutch Civil Code, and does not contain any material mistakes, and the latter is rather new as compared to last year, and so we performed additional work in this respect to the financial statements. Important and key elements in our audit are shown on the next slide. And that would first and foremost be risk assessment. During our audit, we do a risk assessment focusing on those areas in the financial statements in which we see that there's a large risk of making mistakes, and we need to take into account the role of management. And then materiality is very important. At DSM, the materiality of the financial statements as a whole amounts to 30 million euros, and we report on errors that we found that exceed 1 million to Managing Board and the Supervisory Board. In terms of efficiency, we decide which work we perform locally, which work we perform centrally, particularly goodwill acquisitions and divestments, taxes and legal procedures. These are matters that we try to deal with at a central level. In a couple of countries, we use local auditors that perform the work for us. For the consolidated entities, that would be KPMG accountants, and for other not consolidated companies, TBX, DSB, Chemica Invest, there are other big four accountants, and the joint venture is audited by KPMG. And in most countries, there are obligatory statutory audits, mainly carried out by KPMG companies or, in part, by other companies. The foreign auditors report for the purposes of the group and work according to our instructions. We evaluate their independence and their competence, and we are also in touch with them quite frequently regarding their findings and reportings. Important foreign organizations are visited by our central team, and you'll be able to read about that in our opinion. This past year, we visited entities in Switzerland, US, and India, and this year, I visited all these countries myself. In the event of very complicated topics, we would involve specialists. Those would be specialists in the field of IT, pensions, and taxes, for instance. And then, in conclusion, the key audit matters. Throughout the year, we work on the DSM audit, and we talk to Geraldine and Feike quite frequently. We attended all audit committee meetings, and once we attended the supervisory board meeting. And as far as our key matters in the report, well, we reported on that in detail, and these items have been included in the opinion because of their financial importance, complexity, and the judgment that is involved. And just as last year, the valuation of goodwill and valuation of tax positions were included. This year is the valuation of the joint venture Poet DSM and the divestment of the caprolactam business in 2015 was no longer included. And also the change of audit from EY to KPMG. Now, this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Versten, and we will be accepting questions after item 5 of the agenda. Item 5 actually concerns the amendment of the Articles of Association, the reserve policy and dividend policy, and adoption of dividend for 2016. 5A, amendment of the Articles of Association. First point, 5A, the proposed amendment of Articles of Association. This concerns an amendment of Article 32, Section 3 of the Articles of Association concerning dividend for the Compref shares A. This dividend is now linked to long-term interest rates, and now this link will lead to a dividend percentage of 1.7%, which is no longer a reasonable compensation for this type of illiquid capital instruments that these preference shares are. DSM has to offer a fair dividend, a stable dividend, and preferably an increasing dividend. And so therefore the proposal is to amend Article 32, Section 3 of the Articles of Association in such a way that the dividend percentage on the preference shares annually be based on the dividend return of ordinary shares in the previous year. And that would meet and align the interests of the holders of preference shares in terms of dividend return with the interests of holders of ordinary shares. The proposal is for 2016 is that the holders of preference shares receive a dividend percentage of 3.26%, which coincides with the dividend payout of 0.17 euro cents per preference shares. The proposed dividend for common shares is 1.75 euro per share. Now, dividend policy. The reservation policy is unaltered as compared to last year and is linked to dividend policy. The dividend that DSM pays out to its shareholders depends on the circumstances the company is in, the financial performance of the company, and other relevant factors. DSM is aiming for a stable and preferentially an increasing dividend, and the managing board, with the approval of the supervisory board, may propose that dividend be paid out both in cash and in ordinary shares, DSM optional to the shareholder. 5C, the adoption of the dividend for 2016. From the financial statement that has been adopted, we see that a net profit was achieved of 621 million euros for 2016. And based on the Articles of Association, the Managing Board, upon approval of the Supervisory Board, will determine which part of the profit will be reserved. For 2016, it has been determined that no profit will be reserved. From the profit, first, a dividend will be paid out for cumulative preference shares A, and this payout will be 7 million. And what remains is then available to the AGM. With the approval of the Supervisory Board, the Managing Board proposes to the AGM for 2016 to pay out an amount of €1.75 as dividend per common share, taking into account the interim dividend, which was paid out in August 2016 and amounts to 0.55 per ordinary share. The final dividend will then amount to €1.20 per share. At the discretion of or optional to the shareholder, the final dividend will be paid out in cash or ordinary shares DSM. As always, a maximum of 40% of total dividend will be paid out in the form of shares in order to reduce financial charges for DSM. Should shareholders jointly indicate that more than 40%, they want more than 40% of the total dividend to be paid out in shares, the shareholders will then receive shares pro rata and the rest in cash, and you'll find more information in the explanatory note. The dividend will be payable as per the 26th of May 2017. I will now offer the meeting the opportunity to raise questions on item 4 and 5.
Dank u wel, meneer de voorzitter. De naam is Broening.
My name is Bruning, and we'd like to ask a question on 5A. I think it's page 124 of the integrated report. I have to say that you want to pay the owners of Comprefs a bit better. I mean, they can't sell those shares without your permission. Secondly, is this part and parcel of the protective structure for your company? Because I see there is another shareholder who can ask for these shares back, so to speak. Because we are talking about 23% of the votes, aren't we? And my last point, there seems to be a discrepancy between the voting right value for these shares and the economic value. And basically, you're bringing the economic value more in line with the voting value of these shares. Other companies are doing this, Unilever, inter alia, but is that really what you're doing? Are you trying to align these two values? Are you trying to bring them together? Thank you very much. Feike, what would you say to that? What are we talking about here? We're talking about Comprefs A, and those shares, these Comprefs, were issued to the Dutch state on the request of shareholders. The last tranche was taken by the Dutch state to the stock exchange, and you represent the shareholders DSM, and you're worried about enormous dilution taking place. And so the three financial parties took over the interests of the Dutch state and took them to the stock exchange. Now that was welcomed in open arms by shareholders, to such an extent that the share price went up by 10%, thanks to the DSM construction, so to speak, and the endeavours of the Dutch state. So that's why you've got Compref shareholders. They had a certain dividend yield on their invested equity, and we thought that right now it's too low. We don't have to pay them any more. That's quite right, because if they want to sell their Comprefs, they have to get permission to sell them. So we don't have to do it. But I don't have... there's no obligation to pay the dividend of 175 to the ordinary shareholders. But we do that because we think it's a good idea. We think as a company it's a very good idea to cherish the interests of all our shareholders. Now, the compress are about €5 per shareholder. Now, the ordinary shareholders have shares which are worth 10 times more. Now, the comprefs aren't going up in value, they're not changing, and the yield, the dividend on them is so low that we think it's absolutely reasonable to increase that dividend. If you like, it's a paternal responsibility, if you will, to look after the compref shareholders. They can vote, of course, and they can vote in every AGMs just like an ordinary shareholder. So we're looking after their interests. I'm looking towards Dave. I don't actually know. No, I don't know. You read somewhere that you could take the comprefs back. Somebody could take them back. Page 127. It's all in the integrated annual report, apparently, or allegedly. Possibly, what should say. Yeah. The speaker. I'm head of investor relations. It says that these shares can't be transferred without permission unless the judge obliges the holder to transfer them to their earlier owner. That's what it says here. Okay, another question. Last year, DSM wanted to change the Articles of Association with respect to the comprefs, and that was withdrawn after a certain level of criticism from the market. The two of the three objections that we had last year are resolved by the proposal this year, and we will vote in favour of it, majority, although not for everybody whom I represent. There are a few issues, though. First of all, DSM should align compref dividends with the ordinary shares. DSM can increase or decrease the dividend as they will. But could you just assure us that you are just going to do this to align it with the share price level? And if you're going to change that particular policy, would you give an assurance that you would announce that? Secondly, this kind of a share surely is not really in line with corporate best practice. We would encourage DSM to try to get rid of the comprefs and just have one single type of share. Well, says the CEO, we're delighted for your support, even though it's not support for everybody you represent. And we're delighted as well that you think this proposal is better than last year. That's what we think too. But let me just say, we always try to look at the rights that we have in proposals of this nature in terms of base point adjustment. But I am not going to say anything more or commit myself to anything more than currently stands in the text. I think otherwise that's going to be unjust towards proxy holders, people who've been giving voters instructions, etc. My proposal is to put this on the table, what we have written down, and not an iota different, because I don't think that you can change proposals at an AGM. Otherwise, people who aren't here and who've given their voting instructions won't be unfairly represented. Of course, I am happy to say that we are going to do everything we possibly can to ensure equity for everybody. Now, your last comment, you say it's no longer contemporary or the done thing to have different forms of shares. Well, fair enough. But a lot of people would disagree about that. In Denmark, for example, nearly all companies have two classes of shares. In France, many companies have loyalty shares. I can't possibly mention the name of that company at the shareholders meeting, but there are different shareholding practices in different countries, different companies. So what is contemporary? What is... I know one share, one price, one vote. Well, okay, we've heard that. But I have to say, there are a lot of people who disagree with this. So this is a subject that we could discuss until the cows come home. And I'm looking towards the chair here. What we have literally in the proposal here, that's what we should vote on. I think otherwise we're not doing justice to the proxy holders. Says the chair, I can tell you that there's been an inordinate amount of consultation about that particular point on the agenda. We approached a lot of shareholders and got a good deal of support. And any other questions? If not, well, then we're going to start to vote, aren't we? Let me just explain the voting procedure, says the secretary. You will have received a device and a voting pass with a chip. You stick that in the device with the chip on the top towards you, and then you should see your name appear in the display. If you don't, please put your hand up and somebody will give you a hand. You can leave the voting pass in the device during the whole voting procedure. And now I'm asking the operator to turn the whole system on. You can see what options you've got. It's the same every year. You hit 1 if you're in favour, 2 if you are against that item of the agenda, and 3 is an abstention. I hope that's clear. 1 in favour, 2 again, 3 abstention. I'm looking towards the chair. Last formalities. Now, each vote, 1 vote. Each share, 1 vote. Because abstentions, you will only see, because abstentions according to the Articles of Association are votes not cast, you will only see percentages in favour and against. First of all, the adoption of the financial statement. So under item 4 of the agenda, let's vote that. I open the voting. This is vote on the financial statements, the approval thereof for 2016. Please vote. I see that the vote's already stopped. Well, I'm not quite sure. Had it been opened? Had it been closed? So look at the back. I think there's been a little technical glitch here. So let's try and do that one again. We're looking towards the operator. I know the buttons are being pressed at the back of the room, says the secretary, Ms. Van den Broek.
Anders gaan we over op de traditie van het...
Otherwise, I mean, we just have to fall back to sticking your hand up, really.
Ja.
Als het te lang duurt, dan ook de rest van de punten ervoor kunnen lezen.
Kunnen doorgaan met de volgende punten en hierop terugkomen.
Ja, en dan stemmen we in één keer, doen we alles.
Anders wordt breekt om.
Ja.
Het moet wel gestemd worden.
Of een pauze, ja, precies.
Ja, we kunnen terugkomen.
En dan breekt het. We kunnen moeilijk doorgaan.
Ja, maar het is niet te controleren, joh. Dan ben je 20 minuten kwijt.
Nee, we verbreken.
Nee.
Ja, maar je moet wel stemmen hoe je doorgaat. Je kan de vragen over andere agenda.
Dat kun je nog doen, maar daarna moeten we stemmen.
Ja. Het gaat even duren om het...
Well, it seems that we have to reboot the system. So, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So, should we just try it again? Well, let's just try all this again. So, it would be good if we could open the voting for item number 4, the approval of the financial statements. Vote is open. Please vote then. 1 for, 2 against, 3 abstain. Please vote on item 4. The vote is open.
Ik zie hem nog niet op dit scherm lopen.
So you don't see anything on the screen, says the lady in white on the front row.
Ik zie wel dat uw stemmen binnenkomen, maar ik wil graag ook even op het andere scherm zien dat u ook kunt zien dat...
Well, we hope to have a screen showing how the voting is going.
Kijk eens. Daar is ook een uitslag. Nou, het is een mooie uitslag.
Well, this is a very nice result that we've got here. Item number 4, financial statements for 100% for. Only abstentions. That's a record, says the chair. And we do apologise for the making you hang around while the things get in order. Anyhow, so that says that we've adopted the financial statements for 2016. Let's move to vote on item 5A, the amendment of the Articles of Association. You can vote on 5A, that's the amendment of the Articles of Association. 1, 2, 3, remember? I'm looking at the notary public. There are other votes coming in, and I now close the voting procedure, and you can see this has got 99.26% in favour and 0.74% against. Well, we're very happy with that, says the chairman. So the meeting has approved the amendment of the Articles of Association. And we now move to 5C, adoption of the dividend. Please vote.
Ja, ze zijn nagenoeg allemaal binnen. Laatste.
Last votes coming in. I close the vote now. And we see 100%. Very good score, 100% in favour and nobody against. Thank you very much for that. Says the chairman, I note that the meeting has approved the dividend for 2016 for ordinary shares pursuant to the proposal. Now we're going to take items 6, 7 and 8 together. Item 6 has 2 parts: release of liabilities to the members of the managing board. That's point A. And B, release from liability to the members of the supervisory board. You can speak individually to these particular points. This relates to data you can read in the annual report. So item 7 is also here. This is the reappointment of Dimitri de Vrees as a member of the managing board. The supervisory board proposes to reappoint Mr. de Vrees on the basis of his managerial and leadership quality, his broad experience in material sciences, and his contribution to DSM's managing board and executive committee teams, as demonstrated in his first term as managing board member. Mr. de Vrees has added great value to DSM over the years. This reappointment is for a period of 4 years, ending by close of the AGM to be held in 2021. And then item 8 of the agenda relates to the appointment of John Ramsey as member of the Supervisory Board. The Supervisory Board nominates Mr. Ramsey for appointment as member of the Supervisory Board of DSM. The Supervisory Board nominates Mr. Ramsey for his extensive knowledge and experience in the field of finance and accounting, which he's built up in various parts of the world. Mr. Ramsey's expertise covers all the functional areas within finance. He has extensive experience with managing a global finance organization with external stakeholders and with mergers, acquisitions, and divestments. His appointment will strengthen the Supervisory Board in the area of finance. Mr. Ramsey will be an independent member of the Supervisory Board within the meaning of the Dutch Corporate Governance Code and Article 1.4 of the Supervisory Board Regulations. The appointment would be for a period of 4 years, ending by close of the AGM to be held in 2021. Mr. Ramsey is here. John, could you get up, please? Thank you. You've had a look at him. And then we've got Mr. Parson. The Supervisory Board nominates him as an appointment as member of the Supervisory Board. His broad experience as a global business leader in both consumer markets and the service industry in various parts of the world has enabled Mr. Van Paschen to build up a deep understanding of the current trends that are impacting business around the world. With his insights into how digital technology is changing the global economy and disrupting traditional business models, he will contribute to key areas of DSM's development. He will be an independent member of the Supervisory Board within the meaning of the Dutch Corporate Governance Code and of the Supervisory Board Regulations. His nomination is for a period of 4 years, ending by close of AGM 2021. Mr. Van Passion's here. Could you get up? Thank you very much. We could go to a vote, but possibly there are questions. Mr. Decker, you have a question. Yeah, I had 2 questions for the auditor. You can't stop me asking them, can you? So the auditor is coming to the fore. Mr. Decker is a bit slow off the mark here. I've got 2 simple questions for you. The costs of the audits went up by 15%, whereas the company has simplified its structure. So why have the audit costs gone up? That's my first question. And secondly, to what extent is the focus that you had on key audit matters from last year, have they been followed up by management this year? I'm going to try and give you a simple answer to your questions. Let me say, audit costs are fixed for 3 years. There are a certain number of assumptions, namely development of certain things within DSM. Secondly, there are currency effects which are involved because we bill in the local currency where the audits are being carried out, and there can be different scope of the audit in 15, 16, 17, for example. We are now legally obligated to do more than what you see in the integrated annual report. So extra work means extra money, extra costs, and also, as I say, currency effects. So that would generally explain it. Yeah, Mr. Decker feels that that's a lot, 15% to be explained by these points. The auditor says you think it's a lot, but we have discussed this with management and how this increase originated. It's been discussed at we're going to hire in, says the CEO, the VEB, that was the speaker, Mr. Decker, in order to negotiate auditing costs for us. But joking apart, we like your question, but the auditor has given a good answer. The auditor says, as to the follow-up of our points made last year, how does DSM work? Well, we do 2 written reports which are sent both to the Supervisory Board and Managing Board. The management letter, we have an extensive comments from what management thinks and how, and we then come out with a report about what measures needed to be taken. And when I look how management has approached this, I have to say I am happy to see how management has reacted to our comments and how the Supervisory Board has reacted. So you're 95% happy, says Mr. Decker, and the auditor nods. Mr. Decker, maybe you didn't get it, says the chairman, but as we're clustering questions, we're trying to get questions about groups of items. Mr. Decker balks at this. Fine. No further questions? Yes, there are further questions. Yeah, my name is Bruning. The major part of this meeting is related to the past, not much about the future. We'd like to know about the future. Whenever I would like to know, I'd like to hear from people, these people who are just being appointed, what are their priorities? These people whom we're just about to elect to the Supervisory Board, what do they want to do in the future? Well, this is not habitual. John, do you want to say why you're joining? What do you think about the future?
Please.
Yes, I think good questions, because there is a lot about the future, and it is the future of this company that inspired me to come forward and gratefully and with some privilege accept the nomination to come onto the Supervisory Board. I do believe this company has demonstrated its ability to create enormous innovation potential, and I do think the future is looking very, very bright. I do think with my experience of financial markets and having worked across the different regions of Latin America and Asia where the major growth markets are, I can lend a lot of value to the future. So yes, you're right, the future is very important, and I look very much forward to contributing to it.
Thanks, John. Frits, wil je nog iets zeggen? Frits is een halve Nederlander en half...
Frits is half American, half Dutch, so he's going to speak, I don't know what he's going to speak. He's going to speak Dutch. Says Frits, I am very interested in DSM as a company with a really sterling future, innovation, global vision, new technology. And then these are all extremely important plus points for a company. I have experience of working in a company with 180,000 workers and hotels in more than 100 countries. So I know about truly global companies, and I am very interested personally in digital innovation. We had in my last company, about 5 billion turnover, people using our mobile app. So in the last 2 years as well, I've also been an advisor in a number of digital companies, and I really do hope I'm going to make a considerable contribution to the running of DSM. And if you're not aware, even in our business, digitalization is extremely important. Are you happy? Mr. Spanier.
Won't surprise you that I also have a question. I see this list of what Mr. Passer has been doing. Well, at school they taught me that there's 24 hours to a day, and well, he has a supervisory directorship in India, and he has to travel by plane from time to time, and so that takes time as well. Can this gentleman commit himself to the supervisory board? Can he attend all the meetings instead of, us being faced with a list stating that he only attended one meeting and not the rest of them? I think DSM is quite a considerable company, and I need to know whether Mr. van Pasen can find the time that is required in order to properly manage DSM. Well, he has guaranteed as much, and obviously if that doesn't happen. So that'll lead to a debate next year. It's not what I'm saying, but... Right, so we can proceed with the vote. Secretary, please. Okay, subsequently we're going to vote on 6A, 6B, 7, 8A, and 8B. So 5 items. Let us start with 6A. So I'd request you to take the handsets, and I will open the vote for 6A, and you can cast your vote.
Tot uw stemmen binnenkomen.
I'm just looking at the civil law notary, see whether everything is running smoothly. I'm closing the votes for 6A, and then we see that 99.48% is in favour and 0.52% has voted against the proposal. So I hereby confirm that the members of the managing board have been released from liability. And now we can proceed to the supervisory board. Please cast your vote for 6B. I'm opening the vote. Please go ahead. I see that the votes are being received. Just going to wait for the last votes to be cast. Vote is closed. And for this item on the agenda, we have the same score. 99.40% in favour and 0.52% voted against. And so the Supervisory Board has also been released from liability. Item 7 now. The reappointment of Mr. de Vreese, next to me. Vote is open. Just going to wait for all votes to be cast, which is almost the case. I see that all the votes have been cast, and then we see that %100 has voted in favour of the reappointment. No votes against. Congratulations, Dimitri. I don't know how often in your life you scored 100%, but hey. Right, so now let's proceed to 8A. I would like to open the vote for the appointment of Mr. Ramsey. So once again, you can cast your vote and press 1, 2, or 3. Almost all votes have been cast. And I can now close the vote. And the result, we see that almost 100% is 99.60% in favour and 0.40% against.
And here with this, you're appointed, u bent benoemd als lid van de Raad van Commissarissen.
You've been appointed as member of the Supervisory Board. And then, last but not least, Mr. van Pasen. The vote has been opened for the vote on Mr. van Pasen. I see that the votes have been cast and the vote can be closed. And here we see that with the same percentage, 99.6% in favour and 0.4% against. Congratulations. And so Mr. van Pasen has hereby been appointed as a member of the Supervisory Board. Now we will proceed with the meeting. Item 9, which is the reappointment of the external auditor. At the AGM of 2014, KPMG Accountants NV was appointed as an auditor for an initial period of 3 years, 2015, 16 and 17. By virtue of this recommendation of the Audit Committee and the Managing Board, the Supervisory Board suggests or proposes that KPMG Accountants NV be appointed as the auditor for the audit in 2018. Are there no questions? No questions. We can proceed to the vote. We will be dealing with this item separately, so you can cast your vote because the vote is open.
Laatste stemmen druppelen binnen. En dan kunnen we nu...
The last votes are being cast. Yes, we can close the vote. And we have the result. 99.2% is voted in favor, 0.8% against. And so the meeting has agreed to the appointment of the external auditor. Now we have a long list of 4 points that are rather technical. It concerns the next items on the agenda. 10A, extension of the period during which the Managing Board is authorized to issue ordinary shares. And 10B, extension of the period during which the Managing Board is authorized to limit or exclude the preferential right when issuing ordinary shares. The authorization of the Managing Board to have the company repurchase shares and the reduction of issued capital by cancelling shares. In the explanatory note to the agenda, you'll find further information, and I'm just assuming, just as in previous years, that there will be no questions. I don't see anybody raising their hand, so we can proceed with the vote. So we're going to deal with 10A, B, and then 11 and 12. Starting with 10A, I'm opening the vote.
De laatste mensen zijn aan het stemmen, zie ik. En de stemming kan gesloten.
The vote can be closed. In this case, we see that 19.50% is voted in favor and 9.85% against. So I confirm that the meeting has extended the period during which Managing Board is authorized to issue ordinary shares. I shall just wait until we see 10B on the screen. There it is. You may cast your votes for 10B. I'm opening the vote. Almost all the votes have been cast, and we can close the vote. Here's the result, 77.47% in favor and 22.53% against. We need a 2/3 majority of the votes for this item, and we've succeeded. So I can confirm that the AGM has extended the period during which the Managing Board is authorized to limit or exclude the preferential right when issuing ordinary shares. Now, 11, authorization of the Managing Board for the company to repurchase shares. I'm opening the vote. We need the last votes to be cast. We can close the vote. And then we see the result, which is 99.72% in favor and 0.28% against. So the AGM has granted authorization for the Management Board to repurchase shares for the company. The last vote for today, which is reduction of issued capital by cancelling shares, and I'd like to open the last vote for today. We can close the vote because I see that all the votes have been cast. And the result is 99.73% in favour and 0.27 against. So once again, we require a 2/3 majority, but I see that the AGM has resolved to reduce the issued capital in accordance with the proposal of the Managing Board. Now, any other business? Are there any questions? Mr. Stevens. Oh, there's already someone at the microphone. Mr. Stevens, can you wait? Van Riet is my name. I'm an individual shareholder. Mr. Sebesma has been mentioned as the new successor of our Minister of Finance, But I understand he has to stay with the company for another 2 years. And that'll be the end of his term of office. But what are your ambitions? Are you going to stick with the company after 12 years, or are you already looking out for a successor? And I need to compliment your wife, because you lost weight. And how do you lose weight? You lose weight when your wife feeds you properly. Yes, Mr. Siebesma still has a number of years to go. But as a nomination committee and as a supervisory board, we're always worried that one day the time will come that that relationship will come to an end for whichever reason. So we're always looking out for successors in such a case. Feike? Do you want to become a minister? No. I'm also very pleased with my wife. Yes, and he has lost weight, indeed. Right. Okay, Mr. Stevens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 things. First of all, the financial agenda. This winter, we sent all the companies a mailing requesting them to extend their financial agenda until, at the very least, the next AGM, next one to the one that we're attending. And then we received an answer saying that you would publish this on your website. Now, I need to tackle this matter because I think it's a bit of a problem that we don't have hard copies of annual reports. We request them, and then we also get the answer, well, it's posted on our website and you can print it out yourself. Well, I mean, we're talking about sustainability, and one wonders what's going on if we print it out or DSM prints it out. There's no difference, is there, in terms of sustainability? And if the VBDO says, the Association for Sustainable Investment, well, on your laptop with Adobe, you can insert comments. Well, we would ask the VBDO to give us a free of charge course in order for us to be able to add those comments to the Adobe version of the annual report. Mr. Siebesma, I understand your question. I understand it perfectly well. We always have this discussion in-house, and there are people in the second line that always wonder about what I'm saying, but I agree with you. There you go. There's a small difference, because if we print it, it's much more expensive because we print it out this way, and it looks very luxurious, costs a lot of money, and I would assume that you would print it out in an ordinary way. So it's more sustainable for you to print it than for us. But next time, if you ask for a printed version, Louise can print it out and send it to you. I'm pretty convinced that she will do that. And that doesn't apply to everybody, not to everybody. It only applies to Mr. Stevenson. I mean, certain shareholders have certain privileges. I'm sure the legal experts will be rather cross with me, but we will be doing that. I'm sure you don't have any questions anymore now that we've provided you with this wonderful service. Are there any other questions? If not, we will be closing the item of any other business, and we will proceed to the closing of the meeting. We've reached the end of the meeting, but before I close the meeting, I would like to take a moment to draw your attention to the fact that this is the last meeting Mr. Hockley is attending. 12 years he's been working for DSM, a wonderful contribution, and I worked with him for 9 years, or 10 even, and he's always very dynamic, very precise in his comments, and very critical, but in a very constructive way. The way he challenges management in many different ways, as you did today at the meeting, but then in a more intense way, because he really wants to know that, wants to be sure that what management is going to do is going to be good for DSM. So we would like to thank him with our hearts and our brains, and I'd like to ask you for a big hand for Mr. Heerlen. We have some announcements to make. The draft minutes of the meeting shall be published on our website at the latest 3 months after the meeting. And you'll have 3 months' time to respond or to submit comments. And after that, the minutes will be adopted. Please hand in your handsets, your voting handsets, and your headsets. And after the meeting, obviously, as always, we will be serving drinks and a bite to eat. And hope to see you there. The next meeting has been planned for Wednesday, May 9, 2018. Thank you very much for your attention, your excellent questions, and be safe.